So let me introduce a bit my guest speaker or guest conversationist for today. So Erwin is a mentor coach for social enterprise startups, and he is an international speaker and facilitator for social innovation, business ideation, and human-centered design. In his work, he uses an impact-driven and sustainability-focused coaching style, and he is also a part-time lecturer at the Thames International Business School and a freelance resource speaker at the Asian Institute of Management. So Erwin, so nice to have you today finally in the EcoLens. And so the reason why I invited you here today, so I've known you for quite some time working in the social innovation space. And could you tell me more about that in terms of what led you to this sector in general?
It was actually a very interesting and convoluted story. Well, not really convoluted, but a very interesting story. I was very much into culinary back in the early 2000s, so about around 2008 to 2012. And in one of our kitchen tours, or what we call kitchen testing, we had casual conversations about food in the Philippines and all that. And I just asked casually while chopping, I forgot what I was chopping. I was like, where did our food come from? And it's like, it came from, we went to the market, it came from there. Yeah, but I mean, from the market, where did it come from? I mean, what is the essence of food? Where does our food come from? And that actually triggered a lot of curiosity for us, which led us to travel every summer for 3 years, just going around and understanding Filipino cuisine, Filipino culture, and how much food is ingrained in what we do and how we relate to each other as Filipinos and even regional. And then we came across the fact that in that research, of course, you get to meet farmers from different provinces, and then you realize there was a huge disconnect between farmers and the end users. So you can talk about us, you can talk about restaurants, hotels, even resorts. There's a huge disconnect between that and the farmers. And I found that quite interesting. That was a trigger for me to actually search some more. So for 3 years before we ended the group and we went our separate ways because they started working in different fields of culinary or hotel. I went in the direction of for 3 years I went in the direction of doing demos, just continuing to understand. And then I met organic farmers. And then I went to Bacolod for 3 years. And then it's like, wow, this is awesome. You're fully organic, as in the island. The city is fully organic. The island is there's a huge percentage that's organic. And I was wondering why is that? And they were saying, "Oh, we actually fought Monsanto. The government fought Monsanto. The farmers fought Monsanto. Everyone fought Monsanto, and we were able to kick them out." And it's like mind blown, right? And that was the reason why I kept coming back just to keep on understanding it. And I did cooking demos on the side while I was there for 3 years. And that was about 2012 when the buzzword of social enterprise started to make some noise here in the Philippines. And that was led by Bambino, Mark Ruiz, who founded Happy Noy and started the GK Enchanted Farm started coming in. They started to make noise. And so I got used to it. It's like, okay, what is this social enterprise? Is this a buzzword or just something noisy that's going to die out eventually? And it wasn't. And I was hearing stories of how they were empowering tinderas to actually save more money and through the Happy Noise system that they were doing. I was hearing things in the Enchanted Farm, and I visited Enchanted Farm often. And I was hearing things, oh, we're here to empower agriculture. We're here to give more power to the farmers. And I'm like, how do you do that? Well, this is actually the problem. And it's like, oh, that's the same problem that I saw when I was going around the Philippines. There was a huge disconnect between farmers and users. So I kept looking and looking, and then I took an online Coursera course on social innovation by UPenn. I was like, took it seriously and all that. And then I was invited to a fellowship program. So they were pioneering a fellowship program called the Global Social Impact House. And surprisingly, I was the one of the few people that got chosen. I was like, whoa, out of Erwin, you realize how many people are in that course, right? It's like, yeah, it's like dude, that's awesome. And then when I got to the US, it was done actually in Puerto Rico. I saw people from different countries, different continents, from Africa, from Europe, from Asia, and interestingly enough, I met an old friend also in Puerto Rico. It's like, oh, you're here. Oh, you're here. It's like, uh, and we reconnected there, and it was so funny because you realize, like, oh my gosh, look at all these crazy people thinking the same thing, wanted to create change in the environment, wanted to create change in education, wanted to create change. I was like, I like this ecosystem. I'm going to dig deep and go into it further. And actually, that's how it started. That's where it all began. And now I'm very immersed in the ecosystem of Southeast Asia and partially Asia, doing workshops, doing talks, mentoring, coaching. There would be nothing else I'd like to do. I can't think of anything else except doing this.
I'm gonna backtrack a bit, all right? So I think it's really interesting that you started in food and culinary and trying to find out where the food is coming from. I mean, that question itself, that's like one of the biggest questions in the space, the social innovation space. And then from there, you went to all these programs, all these courses and trainings till you eventually get got into the sector itself. And actually, one thing that's also interesting to me is when you mentioned how so you met some people in these events where apparently you met them before as well. So I experienced that myself in the past, and it's quite refreshing in a way. So I guess that's the social innovation ecosystem for you. And so my next question is actually, so you're a mentor coach for social enterprise startups, and and you've been, if I'm not mistaken, you've been mentoring since 2012, right?
The mentoring started about 2017, fairly recent, for 4 years. Actually, 2016. So about
2016.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like since then, so I'm sure you've mentored like quite a number of student startups and several other startups, among them universities. If you could name one memorable experience or memory from mentoring these startups, what would that be?
Um. Oh wow, it's hard to pick. Uh, because for me, I've been teaching for 16 years, and I guess one of the highlights of what I've been doing is not just teaching and redefining what teaching really is in this space. I've had students who learned from me and then you didn't hear from them for quite a while and then gets back to you and said, sir, which is the common way you call people and teachers here. I have an idea, and actually, they are two students, and you want to put up a social enterprise. And I was wondering if you could mentor us. I was like, yeah, sure. What surprises me when I hear these students come back after a few months or a few years after graduation is they have a fresh take on seeing the world. Because of this pandemic, they have a fresh take on what's going on. And it's like they know we're not in a good situation. That's why they want to create impact. They want to work with purpose, and that's important for them. And so, one memorable one is just fairly recent. She wanted to actually the usual thing. She wanted to create aggregate a ways to remove plastic uh, from most of the things that we do. So, plastic packaging. And what's nice about that was I've seen her from the very beginning because she took the classes like I'm actually taking these two classes simply because I want to validate these ideas. I want to see if it has weight, if it can be done. And they're pushing through with it. They're pushing through with it. And I can't wait for the first iteration of their product. That's it. And the other one was in Taiwan. I was invited by the Taiwan Women's Center in cooperation with Impact Hub Taipei. And there was this college student who was also working for plastics. It's like they invented a machine. I was like in my head, and they're like, Who does that? It's like, that's the first thing. Every time I hear these students' ideas, like, who does that? Because that was not my experience. Right? So, and it sucks out microplastics in our oceans and waterways. And it's like, again, it's like, holy, why? And so I started mentoring them. I don't speak a word of Mandarin, but I started mentoring them. And I'm happy to say that they actually are very active in Taiwan currently. One, using their machine that has no mechanical parts. It is actually being powered by water. I don't ask me how to do it. I'm not an engineer, but that's how they explain it. So where's the machine? Oh, there's no machine. It's like, what? And so now they're going around Taiwan, not just selling that machines to local government, but also advancing their advocacy, telling schools and universities, giving talks about the importance of removing plastic and controlling our plastic waste. So she's an amazing student. When I met her before the pandemic. She's taking her MBA now. I think she just really kept on moving forward, and that's what I told her: keep moving forward. Don't. I remember telling them focus on this first because there were two sides to their supply chain and value chain. Focus on the machine first, getting the plastic out before you focus on upcycling. I think they reached the upcycling part already. And what made me proud of her was that it was quite amazing that when I went to Taiwan 2018, it's like, Erwin, I'm actually not there. I'll let you meet other people in my team. I'm actually in Silicon Valley. I got invited, and I'm developing a network here. So she just really pushed it. She just really, really kept moving forward, and that was the amazing part. Two memorable stories actually when it comes to being in this space. I mean, there are others, but those are the two that stand out, right?
Yeah, actually, that's great. So when you mentioned about these technologies, me, I can relate to that because I'm in this one project as well. We're in so it's an incubation program. I think you're aware of it. And there's this one enterprise that basically tackles the similar thing, nanoplastics. They're trying to, for them, they're not trying to suck out the microplastics. They're more like using that microplastics to create, like some kind of new raw material. So, but I like how all
Ooh,
these new technologies are, starting to pop out. And so I've heard you mentioned examples in Taiwan, right? How about in here in the Philippines? Have you encountered any probably noteworthy tech-related startups? Yeah.
there are quite a few, but it's really more focused. Our strength is in the service industry, and that's where you'll find most of our tech startups or social startups are focusing on. Um, but the industry here, so imagine I went to Korea 2015 to study my master's. Towards the end of 2016, almost 2 years in Korea, I came back here. And our ecosystem is a toddler compared to what I've seen in Taiwan, compared to what I've seen in Singapore. Vietnam is going to catch up with us, and I think they're catching up already. Thailand has a very strong social innovation and social entrepreneurship system. Malaysia also has one, and Indonesia actually. Um, Imagine 2016, I was going to do my thesis, and it's like I'm going to focus on how social enterprise impacts social enterprise impact in the Philippines. I couldn't find any research because imagine a transition of Bam Aquino introducing or going into social entrepreneurship and being the pioneer and in pushing social entrepreneurship. That was just 2010. 2012 probably. So there was no data. There was no data. There probably is data, but the problem with the Philippines is, oh, this is our data. I can't share it with you guys, right? And that's what they do in academics. That's how we were trained in academics. This is how we're not going to collaborate because we're LaSalle, we're Ateneo, we're UP, right? And I find that bullshit. Um, Collaboration is the key here, and that's what I've seen that's different from the other countries and in the Philippines. At least uh, back in 2015 and 2016. And one of the researches that I found a lot was about GK Enchanted Farm, and he was from De La Salle, and you work for him. it's like it's like, oh, you know each other. That's very interesting. A lot of research. I read a lot of his research, uh, and but here it's still in its infancy. It's still very much of a toddler because if you imagine, Make Sense started here 2015. If I'm correct. Bill grew about the same time or a year before. Uh, Idea Space was born in 2016. Kubo was born in 2016. So imagine it's 5 years of trying to get ahead or get move forward in this ecosystem. Um, but there are a lot that stand out, but most of them are in agriculture because a lot of people understand the plight of farmers uh, right now and how we are not very sustainable when it comes to food sources. And we found that out the hard way when North Expressway and South Expressway was closed down during the beginning of the pandemic and we were running out of food. So there are quite a few who's working on the agricultural field that stands out for me. Um, well, one of them is Farm On. One of them is a recent one that got in touch with me, but it's also working for agriculture. Their model is the same as Farm On and the same as Cropital, and a lot of these are quite important. So it's very young here, but nothing really stands out that you can see it scaling up in the near future. Maybe a few years more, we can actually have one that actually stands.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, so probably to make this point deeper, so we know that the ecosystem in the Philippines, it's still growing at this point. But ever since the pandemic hit, what did these social enterprises do in your perspective or in your experience? What happened to them during this time? I mean, for sure, for example, a lot of businesses started to close and a host of problems. So for social enterprises, what were these main challenges that they experienced?
Um, the founders of social enterprises are very interesting because they're made for this. They're made for these kinds of situation. And surprisingly enough, when farmers couldn't sell any of their produce here in Manila, and a lot were getting wasted. The first one to mobilize were social enterprise, and I wasn't surprised. Uh, Mad Travel created Mad Market. Um, well, who else? Cherry also started to focus on the farmers and getting produce here in the in Manila, and I think that's what makes social entrepreneurs unique because they see a challenge and it's like they don't go, oh no, it's hard. They are always in the can we find a solution for this and can we collaborate with each other? That's quite automatic, and that's what I saw. And those who are actually familiar with social innovation, social entrepreneurship, uh, whether you want to label it this or that, they responded very well. There are restaurants like we're going to open up, We're going to ask for donations. We're going to let our kitchen staff come in, and some of our, and what we're going to do is based on those donations, we are going to create meals, right? And we're going to distribute it to those families that the government ignored, all right, or failed to address. And a lot of people actually did that. And I know that there is a portal right now for different, I forgot the name of the portal, that if you have certain advocacies like education, oh, we need to send mobile phones, laptops to these schools or to this area because they don't have enough. And and that's how what I like about social entrepreneurs. They know how to respond. They know how to work. And with the restaurants earlier, going back to that, they're able to pay their people, the kitchen staff, because they help in cooking the food to get distributed around Metro Manila. They were able to pay some of their wait staff. And in fact, they had some volunteers work, of course, following protocols, health protocols. And that's what makes social entrepreneurs unique than those who are in traditional businesses or traditional enterprises.
Right. So what you mentioned basically is like this bright side of social entrepreneurship. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I've spoken with certain social entrepreneurs, and well, probably I'll explain it in some kind of anecdote. So social enterprises have, you know, this probably innate or maybe inherent even of trying to help others. But I've talked to some people that they've probably reached this certain tipping point, and like they're starting to reflect whether this is still something for them. And in fact, I'm undergoing this current research wherein we interviewed the social entrepreneur, and she was basically even asking us for advice already on what she should do. What I wanted to get your thoughts on this, on I don't know, maybe like the dark side of social entrepreneurship. How do these entrepreneurs try to find that balance of either staying in the business or probably maybe this is not something for them?
That's a very good question. Um, being in being a social enterprise, being a social entrepreneur, it's hard because the model is different. All right, but what I found out here in this country is we focus so much on our impact, we never really see the relationship of it to our profit. And it's like they're afraid to create or make profit. That's what I'm seeing. Oh, but I'm doing this, like, yeah, but you're not a charity, right? In 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 terms of the model, there's so much focus on creating impact on their beneficiaries. They don't realize that their beneficiaries and the impact that they're creating is very dependent on how their business is running. And let's not even talk about, oh, should I have equity? Should I have shares? Let's not even talk about that. Are you making profit? And is the profit enough for you to be sustainable? All right. And if there are gaps, where are the gaps and why do they exist? And how will you address it? Yeah. And that's what I've been seeing here. Get out of the romance of being a social entrepreneur. In fact, get out of the term being a social entrepreneur. Be an entrepreneur. Be an entrepreneur with impact. All right. Um, and that's what I've been saying lately after the pandemic hit. Look, whether you're a social entrepreneur or not a social entrepreneur, you have a responsibility to make sure that uh, your business is not creating environmental impact or has very minimal environmental impact, and that your social impact and you're also creating social impact. I don't care how, whether you're giving them more uh, better salary than minimum wage, whether you're giving them more, also like they're part of our value chain. So we buy things at fair trade prices. I don't care how you're doing it, but you do it. The moment you exploit someone because you want to create more profit, then you're creating more problems. We have enough problems, and we saw that in terms of poverty, access to healthcare, access to education. That all got, you know, magnified during the pandemic. And those who are not solution focused created a space where, okay, we're just going to go online. A social entrepreneur would think, all right, what about those people who don't have connection? What about those people? And these people will not talk about it. This other side is like, we're just going to go on. That's the solution. No other solutions there is. That's the one only, right? And we're going to create modules, right? Okay, what about the teachers? Well, how are they coping with the changes? Now you have mental health issues. And I think that's where social entrepreneurs actually come in, because they realize, oh my gosh, the healthcare situation in the Philippines is awful. Not everyone has the proper access to it. Our employment issues are awful. What do we do? And our educational system is awful, because all the big universities or the private universities is still focusing on the bottom line. When my idea is, my thoughts are, okay, I know you need students, but let's focus on learning and getting the learning to the students. How are you going to do it? I was like, oh, we lost like 30% of our students. It's like, and what? You're just gonna go, it's like, oh, we lost 30% of our students. And that's what a lot of universities did. I'm not saying it's 30%, I don't have the data for that, but I'm pretty sure they lost percentage of their students. But what are you going to do? And I think that's where social entrepreneurship or social innovation, let's not put it that, social innovation comes into play. Because now you can test solutions. We're not going to say it's going to work first time around, but now you can test solutions. And that is what also current social enterprises should be focusing on. Like, learn how to pivot. Where can you pivot? Where is the problem right now? And it's really understanding what's going on and what's going around. That will help develop the social enterprise further. So, like, going back, focus on profit, and impact. But remember, profit is drives everything that you do so that you can create impact. Number two, learn how to pivot and learn how to scale up. All right. But mostly in this pandemic, learn how to pivot. Where are you going to pivot to? How are you going to change the way you actually deliver the service? How are you going to deliver your products? That's one thing we can actually focus. But the first two is the most important.
So I think this is a really important point to make, trying to balance this profit and impact, paradigm. Um, but uh, probably you would agree that here in the Philippines, so the common like narrative is still you have to provide as much impact as you can. How do we? 'Cause like, the way I see it, it's sort of a systemic kind of challenge. How do you think we could address this kind of? I'm not sure if it's an issue or like a mindset issue of trying to of not being able to balance these two very important aspects, because first and foremost they have to think of themselves as a business, and they can't scale that impact if they're not thinking of themselves as a business. How do you think can we probably change that kind of mindset?
Um, it's really all right. I'm actually a coach for Resolution Project, resolutionproject.org. It's an organization based in New York, and they're focused on social innovation and social enterprise. My mentee is all the way from Africa, right? Helping farmers, same thing, connecting farmers to users, to end users. And what I like about Resolution Project is they go through a whole program. And after the program, there's coaching. So there's two of us coaching. One is from New York, and I'm all the way in the Philippines. And we meet every month. For 2 years, we're going to mentor this girl, and we're going to meet every month. We're going to look at two things: her personal and also personal well being, her plans, and her plans for her um, social enterprise, which is fast near. And I think there's that missing link, because all the incubator programs, it's like, oh, you're done 6 months, and then what? So you can start up, or you can go scale up, and then right. So if they have issues about, oh, we need help in marketing, is there anyone that can help us? Or we need help in terms of uh, finances, because we're not sure about our numbers. Can we talk to someone who can mentor us or coach us? Um, and that's the gap that I see here, because in Japan, when I went there for a trip, like every trip that I went to, I go to my network and it's like, do you know any social enterprise here in Japan that I can sit down and talk to, and they speak a little bit of English. And they have a model that's quite interesting, because they are in their model is this: the organization. They get people who want to create social enterprises, and they're under that organization. What they do is they help you start up, but you also work for the organization. There's a reason for that. So they get salaries. So while they're working for the organization, they have a day to actually sit down with the owners or the founders, and you know, talk about their startups, how they're going, how they're doing, um, and they help them start up. Here's what they do that's very unique, because they do the funding themselves. If you're not making a profit in 6 months, we're going to close you down, right? But it doesn't mean that they if you want to stay within the system, you can continue working for us, and we're going to help you pivot, right? And then you start again. If you survive 1 year and you're creating good profit, however minimal, we're going to invest more. But the catch is, you're going to be under our umbrella, and we get, I think, 5% equity the whole time that you're with us. And they were able to come up with 5 social enterprise that is present in Bangladesh, creating leather, present in Korea, present in Taiwan, present in Indonesia, I think, or Malaysia. And they're doing very well. They started their academy back in, when did I go to Japan? 2018. So they started their academy 2018. I mean, and this guy, like, doesn't know me, total stranger, showed me he was like, okay, I'm going to show you the business model that we have. And it's like, okay, this is the first. If I go to the Philippines, I'm like, I'm not going to share anything. This is mine, right? But he shared it. and it blew me away. And it's like I had half a mind that can I just stay here and work for you? You know, that's how much impact this owner actually had me. And it's funny because it's the Japanese owner who spoke very little English. The other partner was the one who studied in the US and he wasn't there. But we, it was, we clicked, you know, and he was amazing, amazing person to actually talk to. The other one that I use a case study is Nadam, which is a cashmere clothing line in the US. They're a social enterprise. They have a different business model because they separated the how they're going to create impact by creating a nonprofit organization, partnered with people in nonprofits in Mongolia because they were uh, the usual problem. A lot of middlemen, so the Kashmir herders barely scraped by. Wow, I memorized the pitch that they had. Their babies scraped by, so they became the middleman to give more money to the herders, and they are able to sell their price much lesser. So that was the model. But they have a nonprofit and they have the business side. So of course, whatever they earn on their profit model, it goes to the nonprofit. So they can continue. They do a lot of environmental stuff like grassland management. So they prevent desertification. They make sure that they preserve the culture of the people in Mongolia and all that, and at the same time promote the culture. So there are two different models that I've actually seen that has very amazing impact when it comes to focusing and continuing a social enterprise.
So I think this is like the perfect point for me to go to the next question, which is so you've worked with a lot of these entrepreneurs and businesses. So aside from probably these incubation programs or accelerator programs that they join, what else do you think do social enterprises need to succeed?
Funding, funding, a lot of funding. Um, and it's not just a problem here, but I think it's a problem everywhere else in Asia because the model of a social enterprise is totally different from a regular enterprise. It's easy to uh, for a traditional enterprise, it's easy to see where the money will go or where the money where you get your equity or how you get your investment back if that's what you're thinking, if that's the mindset that you're in. But for social enterprise, usually these are people tackling problems um, that are not usual, right? Like, oh, we want to give more money to farmers. It's like, why you do that, right? So what happens to if I invest in you? So we need more impact investors that understand the ecosystem that we're going around in, and not just angel investors or VC capital, venture capitalists, because venture capitalists will just focus on profit and equity. Impact investors focuses on like with the money that I'm going to give you, what kind of impact are you going to create? So we need more of that, and we need more people to take that risk. But secondly, we need to change the way we actually teach our entrepreneurship program. Because even up to now, I will still encounter students or even working people. It's like, oh, it's a social enterprise. Like, what's that? They still don't know what it is. And I think it's time to highly remove that discrepancy of, oh, this is the traditional entrepreneurship program. That's a social entrepreneurship program. And it's like, no, whatever you're teaching in social entrepreneurship program, teach it in teach them in a traditional entrepreneurship program. Teach them sustainability. Teach them create impact. Teach them how to do engage communities. You know, because you need that. It will make them more aware that, okay, you're doing this and this is the effect. Are you aware of that effect? No, I'm just after the profit. And that's what traditional entrepreneurship actually does. So you have to make profit, 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 and then scale up, then grow big, and become Facebook, who doesn't care about fake news and all of those other things. Uh, how do you maintain your values as a startup and all the way to becoming big? Do you really need to become big? Do you really need to become part of that 1%? You know, so, and I think that's one way to actually look at it.
All right. So you've mentioned a lot of things that are, I think, probably some golden advice for those who are aspiring social entrepreneurs, and it's definitely even for myself. These are the things that I hear quite often also in the space, and probably for those who are listening right now, and if they're thinking of becoming a social entrepreneur, what would your advice be for them?
Uh, Understand your users, understand your beneficiaries. That's the main thing. Do not come in. I'm going to be a social enterprise, and this is my solution. How do you know that's what they need, right? And that's, I think, um, the major thing when becoming a social enterprise. You don't just come in with a solution and it's like, oh, this is what they're going to do. And it's like, understand who your users are, what are the needs of your users, understand your beneficiaries, what do they actually need, and then create a business model out of it, create a product out of it, if that's what you want.
Right. So whenever I see these kinds of projects, right? So mostly people would think of the solutions first. And even myself, when I was starting in this space, like quite a long time ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, the first thing that we thought of is, so we thought of aquaponics, right? So we thought it's a cool idea, and we wanted to build on this, and we wanted to build this vertical farm someday, or a container farm. But one of the, I guess, key ingredient that we lacked is really understanding that market. So I would definitely echo what you mentioned about understanding the needs and wants, of course. And even in my program right now, at least in marketing, that's what we're always taught. And yeah, for those listening, we would definitely recommend that you take this advice of focusing on the problem as well. And probably I wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. How essential do you think is identifying a problem in the social innovation space? Because I've seen a lot that constantly fall to this trap of immediately jumping to a solution without having those foundations. What are your thoughts on this?
And that's what you want to avoid. That's why I always say, understand your users, understand your beneficiaries. What are their needs? Simply because if you come there with a solution and the solution doesn't work or it doesn't pan out the way you thought it would be, uh, you waste money, you waste time, you waste resources. Whereas if you actually took time and validated your assumptions, because you can understand your users simply by understanding research and just drawing that. But to really come down and say, like, let's say, like, what do farmers really need? What do these public transport drivers really need? And we're going to create a product around it. Um, it's better to actually validate your assumptions first in terms of the problem, validate your solution first, that is this really what they need? So at least when you start releasing the product or when you get to product development, you have an MVP that people will actually use.
Right. And finally, I think we've come to this point. So I wanted to ask, do you have any initiatives in particular that you wanted to promote here in this podcast?
Um, Well, most of my initiatives right now are really focused on mentoring and coaching. And I'm open again to doing speaking engagements with other organizations, and they can seek me out on LinkedIn or on Facebook.
Perfect. So I actually have, I think I have one or two keywords for this whole conversation. And let me know if you agree. I'm thinking it's learning and entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
All right.
a
So that's
lot of
all.
learning.
Definitely. So that's all the time we have for the Eco Lens, where we address the big and small questions on sustainability. This is Ian Mia, and I hope to see you again. So thanks, Erwin.
Thank you, Ian.